There are increasing indications that Planet X, also known as Nibiru, is moving in a precise direction towards planet Earth. So what does this suggest for those of us who dwell on this planet? Is there actually a biblical link that correlates with the end times as we know it? Many of you believe that NASA and other government bodies, such as the Pentagon and the CIA, are aware of its approach. Your belief carries considerable weight, considering the recent publication of scientific studies claiming that there is proof of an unnamed mysterious planet lurking beyond Pluto. The claim was determined by observations of gravitational influences on a group of celestial bodies called the extreme trans-Neptunian objects, which are orbiting our Sun beyond Neptune. The approach of the mysterious planet Nibiru is at present sending waves of charged plasmatic energy particles through our solar system. The flow of energy will finally affect the core flows of the Earth and result in catastrophic changes in Earth's climate, which is without a doubt occurring on an escalated scale. Planet Earth has been feeling the effects of this inbound planet or system of planets since 1996, with records showing a troublesome increase in seismic and volcanic activity, extreme weather patterns, and catastrophic disasters. U.S. and Russian governments are aware of its approach, as is the Vatican hierarchy, which is keeping a watchful eye on the heavens with their sophisticated telescope perched high in the mountains of Arizona. In the meantime, the public is being kept in the dark regarding this approaching apocalypse. The consensus by many is that such an event would annihilate 2/3 of the world's population, while 2/3 of those who survive the initial impact will perish over time due to starvation and exposure to the elements. The question that persists with respect to Planet X is whether this mysterious planet that scientists now claim exists beyond Pluto is the same planet that is believed to have wiped out much of humanity thousands of years ago. There is, however, more to the story than what meets the eye. Based on the research study known as extreme trans-Neptunian objects and the quasi mechanism signaling the presence of trans-Plutonian planets, posted in 2014 in the Journal Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society letters, there are at least 2 planets, part of our solar system, larger than Earth, lurking out there beyond Pluto, and whose existence can be noticed through their gravitational influences. So it is fair to say that NASA understands that these planetary objects are a serious threat to our civilization. It is widely perceived that researchers had proposed that the so-called Planet X was at least 10 times as large as Earth and was most likely situated at a distance of 250 astronomical units from our Sun, with an orbit of 10 to 20,000 years. There is an understanding that an approaching large body or a star system of planets and moons can trigger considerable differences in magnetic activity, and recent data from our magnetosphere indicates that this is what is now taking place. There were even suggestions that Google Sky had revealed an area in space that had been censored by NASA, showing the winged globe moving through our solar system. So are these subtle warnings an earnest attempt to inform us that an apocalyptic situation is at hand, which is coming from out of this world, something previously unknown to humanity, but which have memories in our subconscious from past lives and records kept over the ages? If we consider the ancient era of Atlantis and Lemuria and what happened to these civilizations, is it any wonder that NASA would redact the location of this incoming body on Google Sky or in their own imagery? Every week, NASA appears to have learned something new that was unimaginable, and yet they want us to imagine that Planet X Nibiru is unreal. As you can envision, the gravitational consequences of a sizable planet moving close to the inner solar system would spell huge problems for planet Earth. Not only are we witnessing climate extremes and a shifting of the Earth, but we are now bearing witness to the very real observations that the four seasons, as we have known them, are now blending. So with all of this in mind, we can now ascertain why certain governments are taking steps to protect their own interests as they prepare for the arrival and the aftermath of this large planetary body or system of planets moving through our solar system. Here is some news that has been widely reported, but which some of you may not be aware of. Russia recently completed building or updating some 5,000 shelters in Moscow. They actually have been quite open about what they are doing, but they haven't specifically stated the actual reason for constructing or updating these shelters. But we do know that they have some facilities that can accommodate up to 100,000 people. The United States is estimated to have over 150 deep underground military bases. Coincidentally, a huge military underground city exists below the Denver airport. Now, these are entire underground cities that have been under construction since the 1980s. But this is a need-to-know classification that is underway and is never published in advance for fear of destabilizing the economy. If you do any research of this topic, you are bound to run into various forms of disinformation. Now, some of it intentional, but much of it produced by uneducated individuals within the public. Until the discovery of Planet X, astronomers had regarded the writings of the ancient Sumerians about this object as legend. When Planet X was discovered in 1983, they suddenly learned that the Sumerians were not the primitive people they had been made out to be by intellectuals of today. Have you ever wondered what the real purpose of the Hubble Space Telescope was intended for? It was not to explore the universe and the solar system, as some have suggested. Rather, the reason for constructing this multi-billion-dollar telescope and then placing it in orbit was for the purpose of observing the inbound Planet X. A June 6th interview with a Hubble insider states this fact as to the Hubble's purpose. He watched this mysterious body through the Hubble telescope and stated that this thing looked as if it was nearby. And the Hubble got cut off, and they encrypted it, and that was the end of any transmission. So let's listen to this interview.
Back in the 1950s, most people aren't aware of it, but there was a scientific storm in America all through the late 50s about this thing out there in space because the astronomers were all watching it, and that was back when they weren't afraid to talk about it. It was in the science magazines. I mean, I had a subscription to, like, Popular Science, and hell, it was on the front cover of the magazine one day in, like, 1961. And I was really excited when I saw it because here's this giant red planet on the horizon of the California coast and a humongous tidal wave coming in towards the coast. And having grew up in the mountains of the Sierras, and this thing in the magazine, it said this tidal wave coming in was going to be at least 3 miles high. And I went in and showed it to everybody in the house, and they laughed, and they said, look, It says right here, there's nothing to worry about. It won't be here for another 50 years. Hey, guess what? That 50 years has came and gone. And this baby's out there in the sky. They've been watching it. I watched it. And I can tell you, this thing has got so much trash coming around it. You know how we live in a solar system? We've got 9 planets and a big sun. This thing has got 7 planets and its own sun. The years as it went by and we watched it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then finally, about '08, we could see this thing like it was across the street. And we could see that it was a blazing hot ball of fire giving out sparkles of red iron oxide dust for thousands of miles in every direction. And you could see the planet circulating it. Now, I'll tell you one thing that I really am nervous about. I think this thing's got a planet like ours circling it. This is its own solar system. We're about to have a solar system come through the middle of our solar system. This can't be good. But unfortunately, it looks as though that's what's going to happen. We were looking at asteroids right close to this thing. There's asteroids that are floating around right near that are orbiting the main sun itself. These things appear to be about 500 miles across. This thing looks like a giant red teardrop-shaped dust cloud. And you can see, once if you're able to see it up close like we did, you can see every speck out there. Now, these CIA people that I know say that we're not going to be that close to it when it goes past us. They're saying that in order to attain breakaway speed, when it comes up around the backside of the sun, its speed will at least double, possibly more, which will put it here earlier than everybody is saying it will, and that this thing will probably be about 20 million miles from us when it crosses in front of us. And then as soon as it flips us upside down, we're going to go into its debris field. These CIA guys told me that this pole shift will probably happen from start to finish in around 28 minutes. That doesn't give you a lot of warning. When you see that thing out there in the sky, you're going to have to run as fast as you can to your underground facility, because this is going to happen so fast. Now, see, here's another thing nobody's talking about. You've got this giant iron planet that they say is 47,000 miles across, getting ready to come up past us. And when it starts to approach us, it's going to start and have real serious effects.
So is it a planet or a failed star?
It's not a failed star. You know, I saw this thing up close. It did not look like a failed star. It looked just like our sun.
Right.
Okay. Would you call our sun a failed star?
No. Okay. Well, you had said planet. I wasn't sure if it was like a failed star brown dwarf or a full sun. So it's a full sun?
It looks to me like a miniature sun, just like the one we have. The only difference is our sun is giving off flames and stuff, and this one's doing the same thing as it, but it's giving off this red iron oxide cloud of dust around it. And until it got close, we couldn't even tell what was in there. We could see it was hot, and it looked like it was just a dull red when we were first able to discern it through the red cloud. But as it approached, it started to become more apparent that this thing is just orange hot.
Right.
And it's got this enormous, and I mean enormous, at least 50 or 100,000 miles on each side of it, this red dust cloud that goes all the way around it. I know when we were watching it, as it started to make the upward swing to approach behind our sun, it was amazing. The red dust cloud settled down. Instead of being round, it started to settle down into a V, like wings, upside-down wings.
Right.
And I thought, boy, I wonder if that's where the ancient Sumerians got the idea this thing had wings, because, you know, centrifugal force is a funny thing. When it comes back up around the planet, when we see it in the sky, my guess is it's going to look like it's got wings, because centrifugal force is going to be pulling the red iron oxide dust and particles out to one side. This thing's going to look like a big red dragon, exactly like all the ancient Sumerians and the Chinese and all the rest of them that had documented this thing's passing before. It didn't look like a white ball or a snow cloud or nothing. It looked like a big red iron oxide dust cloud with a superheated star in the middle of it. And, I mean, you know, and that's what we've seen. So, you know, I don't care what anybody else says. There's a possibility. There's more than one thing out there. You know, I watched it through the Hubble Space Telescope, And when this thing looked like it was across the street, the Hubble got cut off and they encrypted it, and that was the end of any transmissions we had to watch. And we know that the Hubble, in order to be in the shadow of the Earth, had to be at an angle, and so that meant it was looking downward. And this thing was coming up underneath of us, and I tell you the honest to God truth, I personally think this thing is real close to us right now. But, you know, that's just my general feeling that, you know, and I'm a pretty psychic guy. I have the feeling that this thing is right close by and that we're going to see it any time. Okay? Because, listen, they've known about this thing forever. And I mean, they've known about it forever. I mean, if I read about it in a science magazine in 1961, that tells you that, I mean, it's only 1,800 years away. How could they not be able to see it when it came around the backside of the last sun and headed this way?
Right.
You have to know they've been watching it, because if you know, Carl Sagan was showing stuff that they took with their old telescopes that was billions and billions of miles away. And this thing's only 1,800 years away. Well, and by 1930, it was only 70 years away. You know, we do estimate that this thing, let me give you a thing, maybe you can figure out your own timeline. We estimated that this thing is traveling around 3,500 miles an hour, okay?
Okay.
That was our estimate of its speed. Now, it has been picking up speed, and that's the reason why we think it's going to arrive early, because when it comes around the backside of the sun, it's got to double that speed in order to attain breakaway speed to leave the sun and not wind up orbiting it. It's never orbited the sun in the past that we know of, so that means that it's going to have to attain breakaway speed to head back out into space. Now, you look at the NASA videos, photos, and all this other crap those morons put on the internet. This thing is coming in. It's going to, as soon as it goes around the top of the sun, it's going to go back out into space.
Right.
And it's going to do this really fast. When it goes past us, it's going to go past us so fast that we'll almost have no time to get ready. That's my opinion, but, you know, just drawing it out on paper a few times and thinking about it, and I went, you know, if this thing picks up enough speed to make breakaway speed, then that means it's going to come past us. You know, this thing, according to what I was told, is that this thing is approximately 47,000 miles in diameter, you know, 4 or 5 times the size of the Earth, and it'll come past us, and we won't have a lot of warning, and we won't get to see it in the sky until it's on us. Now, I was told that the poles are not shifting at 42 miles a year. They're shifting at 42 miles a day. And the reason is because this planet is rolling over to face this thing. Now, when it goes by, it's not going to push our North Pole away. It's going to grab our southern pole with its northern pole, and it's going to be like somebody kicked this planet in the ass. That earthquake that it talks about in Revelations, when the opening of the sixth seal comes, from what I've been told, that's very accurate, because that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a massive earthquake when it locks onto us. As it goes past us, we're going to follow it right upside down. The oceans are just going to be roaring from pole to pole, as you could well guess they would, because if you take a planet that's 7,000 miles across and roll it upside down in 30 minutes, you're going to have some real serious problems with wind and water. We should be preparing to expect this thing to show up any time.
So this particular insider is stating in the most revealing terms that something ominous is heading our way that NASA has known about for decades. Nibiru, aka Planet X, and referred to by the Vatican as Wormwood, has a mass that is 3 to 5 times the mass of Jupiter. Its composition is cesium, iron oxide, iron, oxygen, and ozone. And according to the interview by the Hubble Insider, it consists of 7 planets and moons that orbit it and innumerable asteroids. Its existence is known by all of the major governments of the world, and they are prepared, as I described earlier in this presentation. The object is very big, and until recently it is a red dwarf star visible only in the infrared spectrum. The agent claims that the government is monitoring the system and that in 2008 it could be seen in high detail with infrared telescopes. But the manner of observation is beginning to change. Using deductive logic, a number of independent videos are capturing its close approach now. We can speculate about its existence and whether the images and videos being published on a regular basis are genuine captures. But it doesn't change the narrative that something big is out there. Even the most reputable scientists are coming to the same conclusion that we have been warning about for many years now. That whatever is out there must be found and determined as to its impact upon the solar system and planet Earth. So it's no longer a question of whether it actually exists, but rather its actual location and how long before its absolute impact will be felt on our planet. In closing, I wanted to share with you a few troubling observations that were posted recently on Facebook. The first one is a capture from the Skycam Observatory in Deakin, Australia, showing the two-sun phenomenon. Now, the sun's companion has been visible in this side-by-side view on all Skycam for several days now, which indicates that the Nemesis system is rising to the ecliptic, as I mentioned in the video which I published on October the 28th. So something is definitely taking place now, and it behooves us to start paying careful attention to the skies. So if any of our viewers and subscribers have anything of value, any type of information or images you care to share with us, please forward them over here for a review as soon as you can. Also mentioned in this video presentation was the indication that this system would be accompanied by a long trail of debris consisting of fairly large-sized meteors and asteroids. The number of space objects that are penetrating the Earth's magnetic field has increased substantially in the past couple of years. So take a look at this incredible capture from Japan on October the 31st. And finally, if this doesn't blow you away, check out this eerie sky captured from Las Palmas, Spain on October the 26th. So as you can see, something definitely is going on that is very difficult to explain. It was in mid-August of this year, as some of you are aware, that myself and my family members and a number of friends were among the many tens of thousands who suffered the worst flooding in recorded history here in southeastern Louisiana. We are still recovering from that devastation. The funny thing about all of this is that it seems that we encounter one extreme weather event after another. Since the Great Flood of 2016, we have had what is now considered to be one of the most severe droughts that this area has encountered in recent times for this time of the year. Not only has our temperatures been steadily above normal, but the rainfall has registered less than 1/4 of an inch for the past 2 months. So I can tell you firsthand from my experiences that things are changing quickly here on earth and in the heavens. And it's important that we stay true to ourselves and help one another as we move through these troubled times.
Baptist preacher, and I don't know, I think it's what a Baptist preacher ought to be talking about, and they're not, are they?
No, Clay, but that's just one person who hasn't really listened. Wait till you listen some more, and you'll see that it's not religion at all. It's
all right, I will keep it going.
A few more minutes.
But just what I've heard described so far certainly sounds like the advent of Planet X, or, you know, a celestial body, but here, we'll go ahead and listen to the rest of it.
Okay.
Death is a given. That's what they will think. What could be so terrible that Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 22, the first part of the verse? And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. When you look the word saved up in the Greek section of the Strong's Concordance, it could mean spiritual or physical. And since this is talking about flesh being saved, it means being saved alive rather than everyone dying. So it's going to require a supernatural intervention by Jesus Christ to prevent this planet from dying. Everything on it. Scientists talk about a lost continent called Atlantis. The lost continents, did it really exist? None of us have been there.
Writing about it.
Could it be that nations have been destroyed before?
Wrote about it.
People remaining alive, but did not record the causes of the destruction and why their nation disappeared or a whole continent disappeared. A man by the name of Solon, S-O-L-O-N, who was a Greek historian. He was a philosopher and a statesman in Athens, Greece, between 639 and 559 BC. He traveled to Egypt and interacted with the historians from Egypt in his day, because Egypt was the greatest nation at that time. It had detailed records, great libraries of things that happened in the past. He made notes and writings from the Egyptians' history books. On one such visit, the Egyptian priests, who were pagan, but still they have eyes, they can read, they can write and record history, told Solon the following concerning the demise of Atlantis, and how there were recurring cataclysms that caused destructions from time to time. I will quote from the book Pole Shift, the section that he talked about here. You Greeks are but children. There is no old doctrine handed down among you, but by by ancient traditions or any science which is of age. I will tell you the reason behind this. There have been and will be again many destructions of mankind out of many causes. The greatest having been brought about by earth fire and inundation, that means flooding. Whereas you Greeks and other nations did not keep records, imperishable records of Atlantis, we Egyptians did. And then after a long period of time, the usual inundation or flooding visits the earth like a pestilence and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. So the society died, except for the few. And thus you have to begin over again as children, having no knowledge as time raced by that there were events that happened in the past that were very devastating to the human race, and know nothing of what happened in ancient times, either among us or among yourselves. End of quote. That was from John White's book, Pole Shift, page 38. In other words, what the ancient Egyptian priests were telling the Greeks historian at this time was that many civilizations throughout history of our planet have been wiped out by a recurring catastrophe, something that would come along ever so often. These civilization-ending cataclysms not only destroyed many ancient cultures that we're digging up and the artifacts from them to prove they existed, but their written records and recorded history as well, forcing them literally to start over as children. As time went on, they would forget what caused the destruction. Recorded historians did not exist in many of these societies. So it is that these global cataclysms occurred, but many people scoffed because they didn't have the accurate information. Today I hope to give you some of the accurate information as to what this Bible prophecy that I've already read and many others, what it's all about. The Egyptians told Solon about the destroyed civilization called Atlantis. Atlantis was a series of islands that lay west of the Straits of Gibraltar, out into the Atlantic Ocean. Then the usual, as they said, inundation or flood struck the earth. It involved earthquakes and floods. They had a little warning. Atlantis was engulfed with ravages of the ocean. The waves overtook it. Huge tidal waves. Finally, Atlantis slipped between and under the great tidal waves, the giant waves, 3,000 feet in height, never to be seen or heard from again, but they lay deep under the ocean. In 1828, the Museum of Leiden in the Netherlands obtained a copy of a very old and ancient text known as Ipuwer, I-P-U-W-E-R, papyrus. And this was recorded in a book. This text describes a massive cataclysm that struck Egypt thousands of years ago. And they set forth a remarkable understanding of what has happened to many civilizations in the past in this papyrus. Statements from it reveal that the nation was totally devastated. Agriculture was destroyed. both the upper and the lower Egyptian became wasteland. And we had the Great Sahara Desert as a direct result. Mr. A.H. Gardner wrote in a book concerning this particular papyrus that was in the Leiden Museum, quote, "It was no merely local disturbance that is here described, but a great and overwhelming national disaster," end of quote. Now, this ancient manuscript said that the earth turned upside down.
All right, John DiNardo. It's still playing here, John. Hold on just a second. This is pretty interesting, John. You know, I wrote about that event that he just described 40 years ago. And I'm just bringing that back out now.
Well, it's really, this is the ideal time to be bringing that information out, because that coincides with the events that we see beginning to ramp up on planet Earth right now over the last several years. At that time you brought it out 40 years ago, nobody was interested, but now they will be.
Yeah, and I've got 40 years of research to back up everything I started 40 years ago. So shall I go ahead and let this little clip finish?
Yeah, if you could start from the beginning of that, those voices that we just heard a few seconds ago, the introduction there.
Yeah, let's see here.
It's like maybe about a half a minute ago.
Okay, we just got a little musical interlude here. And, you know, all the signs are that what happened to Atlantis is happening now to us. Hang on.
Isn't that a pole shift? It said that the sky was in confusion. Why would the sky be in confusion? It was the earth that tilted on its axis, that was turned upside down and had a pole shift. Not the stars, not the sun, not the moon. They were constant as always. But it was from the perspective of human beings that the sky was in confusion. Could that have been referring to a time when the earth altered its rotation? We'll see. It's recorded in history that it has happened. Whatever it was, it destroyed an entire nation, its cities, its agriculture, its infrastructure.
John?
Yes, Clay.
I wrote about this and the reason I wrote about it wasn't because I was psychic or anything necessarily, but I've read Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision, and that's actually what I wrote. I wrote about the altering of the orbits of Mars and Venus, having them both come too close to Earth, and that same time period there. That's
yes.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, this has happened in the past. When comets are drawn into our solar system, these comets are, contrary to what the mass media has been giving you the deceptive or erroneous definition of comets, claiming that a comet is a dirty snowball, icy, and that's absolutely false. They've proven this already, though. And we have the high technology space probes. They have discovered that they come from massive objects. And of course, they don't want to change their projected mainstream description of a comet, because it's embarrassing for them to have to withdraw their definition and change it and admit that they were wrong. But it's becoming so obvious that we don't know how we're going to tell the public the fact that comets are very massive. Well, when these comets come in, and why would they come in? Well, let me explain it to you from a very logical basis of physics. The natural laws of science that we see in operation every day of our lives. I'm a state certified to teach all of the sciences in high schools of New Jersey, and I'm a former high school physics teacher. So I'll give you some basic physics principles that will clearly explain why this would be happening and why it is happening now. That massive big bodies are being drawn into our solar system. It's all gravity. We see the principle of gravity in operation throughout our day, every day. And, when something falls off the edge of our table, goes through the edge of our table, it's going to fall to the ground because it is a gravitational force attraction between two masses. Everyone knows this. And that's why objects fall to the ground, and that's why we fall to the ground. Well, if you can imagine meteors that are captured in Earth's gravitational force field, way out in the fringes of, very weak fringes of Earth's gravitational force field, the meteors that come in are drawn in. Once they get even within the weak fringes of that force field, they're gradually drawn in by that pulling force and accelerated toward the Earth. Now, as we get closer to the Earth, Sir Isaac Newton's universal law of gravitation states that the force of attraction between the gravitational force of attraction between two bodies increases exponentially as the two bodies get closer together. So it's really a tremendous increase in the gravitational force as this asteroid begins to plunge toward Earth. And consequently, because of this increase in gravitational force, you have a commensurate increase in gravitational acceleration. So the asteroid or the meteor begins to accelerate tremendously until it's falling to Earth so fast that the friction of the air heats up the asteroid or the meteor, and it begins to glow. The meteor begins to glow, and this is what we call shooting stars. Now, sometimes it gets so hot, the meteor gets so hot that it explodes before it hits the Earth. And that is a good thing, because then you do not have an impact. But if the meteor is large enough, then it will strike the Earth. And now we're getting more and more bolide or bullet-like strikes from meteors upon. These are called, when a meteor hits the Earth, it's called a meteorite. And these are occurring much more frequently now. The reason is that when comets are drawn in gravitationally to our solar system, well, let me explain first of all. These are drawn in not by Earth, but by the huge, incredibly great gravitational force field of our sun. You see, our sun is estimated to have a mass of about 1/3 of a million. 1/3 of a million Earth masses. So can you imagine the mass of the Earth multiplied by 1/3 of a million, and that's the mass of the sun. So when objects come close to our solar system, they get sucked into Earth to our sun's gravitational force field, even if they're as far out as Pluto, and they get pulled in and they begin to accelerate, just as I described with the asteroid or meteor accelerating, getting caught in Earth's gravitational field and accelerating, plummeting toward Earth. Well, likewise, you have the same acceleration of comets coming in toward the sun. Now, it will accelerate, the comet will accelerate toward the larger body, and therefore it will not hit Earth. It's aimed, its focus, its rendezvous is with the sun. But it will pass by Earth, over the top of Earth, and over all the planets that are coming in on its way toward the sun. And when it gets overhead or even below the Earth, doesn't matter whether it's soaring above the Earth or soaring below the Earth, if it gets close enough, it's going to cause gravitational forces that will be absolutely devastating to Earth. These gravitational forces act like a masseuse would act on a person's skin. The forces pull and massage the Earth's crust. not only the Earth's crust, but the underlying mantle of the Earth, which is very thick, viscous, molten rock, many, many miles deep, much thicker than Earth's crust. This molten, sort of visualize it as chocolate pudding beneath the crust of the Earth. And to visualize the Earth's crust as the skin that might form on top of chocolate pudding. And when you let it cool on the stove, you see the skin on top. I had gone to my library, my county library, and photocopied the New York Times article and Washington Post articles and an article from the U.S. News and World Report, the third largest news magazine in the United States. Going by the government, we have evidence in the New York Times that the federal government of the United States actually announced that there's a huge brown dwarf star that is captured in our solar system's gravitational force field. That means it's on the outer fringes, as I was describing before, of the sun's gravitational force field, which means it is inevitable that this massive body, if it got caught in the fringes of the sun's gravitational field, is definitely going to be pulled in, and is definitely now being pulled in and accelerated toward the sun. And this happened many years ago, but it takes a long time because the solar system is incredibly vast. So it takes many years for this object to accelerate toward the sun. Well, this article I'm going to read to you, I actually photocopied it. You can get this is proof. I mean, it's the article itself. It's not a transcript. It's a photocopy of the New York Times article. Sunday, January 30th, 1983, the New York Times title, Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X. Now, here you have the New York Times using the term Planet X many, many years ago. So anybody, any person who is unenlightened should realize that this is not a false term, Planet X, that sounds like a cheap science fiction movie. It's indeed the name that astronomers and scientists have given to this celestial body that they have discovered. I'm going to read the article from the New York Times, Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X by John Noble Wilford. Quote, something out there beyond the farthest reaches of the known solar system seems to be tugging at Uranus and Neptune. Some gravitational force keeps perturbing the two giant planets, causing irregularities in their orbits. The force suggests a presence far away and unseen, a large object that may be the long-sought Planet X. Evidence assembled in recent years has led several groups of astronomers to renew the search for the 10th planet. They are devoting more time to visual observations with a 200-inch telescope at Mount Palomar in California. They are tracking two Pioneer spacecraft, and incidentally, we now know that those two Pioneer spacecraft have indeed detected gravitational pull from Planet X, and that's why the two Pioneer spacecraft were sent up to go to the deepest reaches of our solar system and out into deep space, because one of them was sent out near where they calculated Planet X to be by its gravitational pull. So they sent out this Pioneer 10 spacecraft to see if the spacecraft would be pulled off of its trajectory by this unseen but felt gravitation force, and indeed it was felt. So they proved by the Pioneer spacecraft that it was there. I'll go back to the article. They're tracking two Pioneer spacecraft now approaching the orbit of distant Pluto. See if variations in their trajectories provide clues to the source of this mysterious force. And they are hoping that a satellite-borne telescope launched just last week will detect heat signatures from this planet, or whatever it is out there. The Infrared Astronomical Satellite, that's IRAS, was boosted into a 560-mile-high polar orbit Tuesday night from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. It represents an $80 million venture by the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands. In the next 6 or 7 months, this telescope is expected to conduct a wide-ranging survey of nearly all the sky, detecting sources not of ordinary light, but of infrared radiation, which is invisible to the human eye and largely absorbed by the atmosphere. Scientists thus hope that the new telescope will chart thousands of infrared emitting objects that have gone undetected, stars, interstellar clouds, asteroids, and with any luck, this object that pulls at Uranus and Neptune. Well, anyway, I'll break off that article, and here we go. We're going to fast forward 11 months into the future, from January 30th, 1983 to December 30th, 1983. I've got the article right here. Washington Post. Again, I photocopied this article. So there's proof. It's not a transcript. It's the actual photocopy from my library archive. Washington Post, December 30th, 1983. Front page. Headline. Mystery heavenly body discovered, possibly as large as Jupiter. By Thomas O'Toole, Washington Post staff writer. Quote, a heavenly body possibly as large as the giant planet Jupiter, and possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. So mysterious is the object that astronomers do not know if it is a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar. Now, a protostar would be a brown dwarf star, or a star that is beginning to form. A star that's in the early formation stages.
Now, I have a hard time. I have a hard time believing with the Hubble with the Hubble telescope out there, that they can't really identify it. I mean, why are they saying this? It's,
well, you're right. You're right. I mean, this is part of the cover-up. Cover-up started from the National Security Administration, which is the head of all the spy agencies in the United States government, in our covert government. You should call it.
Okay, John. My guest is John DiNardo, who has been doing all of the research on Planet X ever since, and I started covering the story of Planet X. So this brown dwarf star could be Planet X, or it could be still on its way. It's still, has anybody independently of NASA been able to identify this? And also, this would explain, I believe, that 10,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, the pyramids and that type of structure was built to withstand exactly what you've been describing: a planetary crossing, a shift, a polar shift, a rotation shift. The sun used to rise in the west, didn't it, John?
Right. In fact, that is a part of David J. Smith's document you just heard before the recording, where he cites ancient historical records from various civilizations, and these were some books written by scholars that he has referred to. He cited the books and names of the authors. And he described how various civilizations have stated that the sun used to rise in the west and set in the east. It had changed its direction of rotation. Now, we can relate this to basic physics, and it's very useful to visualize a child's top. I hope people here are not too young to know what a spinning top is, because a lot of times, children don't get spinning tops anymore for Christmas. But you can visualize it like a gyroscope. It looks like an apple or a ball that spins at such a high speed, so that it remains erect and doesn't topple over. That's the principle of a gyroscope. Well, that's the way Earth is. Earth rotates at a speed that's fast enough to keep it erect. It's not perfect because there is a tilt to the Earth axis. We know that. But essentially, it's not, there is a wobble to Earth also. It's a slight wobble, but it's not a wobble that would be strong enough or accentuating enough to cause disasters.
John, if the government is aware that this is coming, that this is going to happen, and it's probably all of the predictions, all the signs are it's happening now and it's happening this year. We've had an increase in earthquakes, we've had an increase in volcanoes, we've got an increase in but they have spent a lot of money in a lot of countries building underground shelters, underground cities, and that's so an elite few can survive, and the other a few billion people can be just taken out.
That's right. And you know, they'll tell you, and it's true, that the underground cities also are prepared for another emergency, and that is nuclear war. But they started building these underground cities. They've got, according to Phil Schneider, who was murdered, this man, this information was so tightly secretive that they actually murdered a courageous, patriotic man, Philip Schneider, who was a high-level geologist working for the U.S. government and excavating these underground cities. And he began to give speeches about the existence of these underground cities. Well, according to Phil Schneider, there were 129 underground cities all over the world, and that is as of about 15 years ago. And many of them are very deep, they're huge, they've taken billions and trillions of dollars from our tax money to build these underground cities. And other countries have done the same. Russia, even the Vatican, I've heard that the Vatican has an underground city in the Italian Alps. And of course, you would expect it to be underneath a mountain, just as one of the major underground cities in the United States is under a mountain. Cheyenne, in the bowels of Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, near Denver, I believe. And even under the Denver airport, there is some kind of underground city. The airport was built far from the city. There seems to be no reason why from what Governor Jesse Ventura has mentioned, there seems to be no reason why they would have constructed this Denver airport so far away from the major city. But they went through it, and they had a true TV special with Jesse Ventura, Conspiracy Theory, about 2 years ago. I put it on high-quality DVD. I have it recorded. And you can get it all over YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in Jesse Ventura Apocalypse 2012. Well, he shows these huge rectangular-shaped tunnels, concrete tunnel conduits. It's sort of like a huge concrete structure, and it's large enough, probably about 20 feet by 20 feet wide and 15 feet high. And they were laying on top of the ground in the airport area. And he was driving through and photographing them, and he said those are definitely going to be used for underground tunnels. Well, Phil Schneider did describe in his book, the book that Marshall Masters had published, Planet X Forecast in 2012, Survival Guide by Marshall Masters. Phil Schneider's testimony is in there that they have underground, I guess it's nuclear-powered underground tunneling machines that they dig a tunnel 28 feet wide by 20 feet high, I think it is, and it's so hot that it actually melts the rock underneath, and it causes the rock to be surface of the tunnel to become smooth like glass. And they can progress at 7 miles of digging, 7-mile tunnels per day with these machines. And many of these tunnels are interconnected. Well, bottom line is they're going underground. They know all about it. Jesse Ventura and his producer, Michael Braverman, spoke to the chief of security, Colonel Wynn, down underneath the Cheyenne Mountain. And he asked Colonel Wynn, when the disasters occur on Earth and the people of Colorado go streaming down to go underground for protection, will they be able to get into this underground city? And Colonel Wynn replied, when those steel blast doors are closed, you can knock all day long. They're not getting in. And he has highly trained military personnel there to protect that city at whatever cost, even if it means shooting Americans who may be trying to get in. Well, there's the story of what the elite are doing. They're getting ready to go underground. They know this is happening, and one of the reasons, I'm sure, why they're racing at such a frantic pace to institute their global dictatorship, just seizing all kinds of power so abruptly and shockingly, is because they know that the disasters are about to accelerate. They have the control of NASA and all the space probes and the space telescopes, and they see these objects coming. They are not about to tell us about it. They figure, well, it'll be a wonderful depopulation method to just allow everybody to be killed, so that they can achieve their stated purpose which is engraved in stone in the Georgia Guidestone. Their stated purpose, engraved in stone, is to exterminate 12 out of every 13 people on planet Earth, leaving 500 million people remaining on Earth.
That would
So
be
we got 6.5 billion.
that would be 499 million slaves and 1 million elite.
That's right. They need their slaves. And so this would be a way to exterminate the people, just let them be killed by the natural disasters. And the major disasters that I see coming are the windstorms, which are just horrific. I mean, super tornadoes we're seeing super hurricanes, super straight line windstorms, and but the major threat that I see coming very soon, and we could all see it, it's not only me, it's the government that has stated it, the National Academy of Sciences, which is the most esteemed scientific organization in the government of the United States. The National Academy of Sciences claims that the solar excitation, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections in 2012 and 2013 will be tremendous, so strong that they will take out the power grid. So that will be the entire globe, or much of the globe will be without power. But what also happens with these tremendous solar storms, which are not only heat intensified, but also electric particles are blasted from the sun toward the earth, people will be burned, singed, and also afflicted by X-rays emitted by the sun. So there's all kinds of radiation, X-radiation, there's heat, infrared, everything is going to cause tremendous death and destruction to people living on the surface when these solar flares occur. But the very first thing is this, probably, the least of it will be the destruction of the power grid, according to the National Academy of Sciences. And this has happened already, so we can look back in history and say, wow, this is no longer theoretical. This has actually happened in 1859. Fortunately, all they had back in 1859 were telegraph wires, and they got burned from tremendous solar activity back then. But now we've got such a sensitive electronic and power infrastructure that everything will be destroyed, including the equipment that's connected to the power line. And the computer systems will be damaged. And as we all know, you don't get food in your supermarket anymore without a complex network of computers and delivery systems and all that. Well, that gets, when the computer systems go down, you don't have anything really. You don't have food production, you don't have food distribution. And then the earthquakes which are occurring, and look at the destruction or the breakup of the nation's thoroughfares and highways as a result of these storms.
Now,
as a result of the tornadoes, you can't get through with all the debris.
Edgar Casey told us that we would have an inland sea where the Mississippi River is.
Yeah, Edgar Casey, he was not a guy who consciously dreamed up these ideas. He would go into a trance, and mainly his purpose was not even to foretell the future of the earth. His purpose was to heal people. And he indeed has records that are at the archives at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It's an entire library that has records of his healing. He would go into a trance, and without ever seeing the patient, who lived many miles away most of the time, he would, in an unconscious state, describe what was wrong with the person and what could be used to heal them. And there were doctors trying to go to Edgar Casey to get diagnoses of their patients. That's how reliable he was. And his son, Hugh Lynn Casey, said they would have trucks coming to Casey's house when he was a boy. Hugh Lynn Casey would see these trucks coming in with mail loaded, and people were begging him for readings, what he called unconscious psychic readings, as to the cure for some ailment that these letter writers had.
What did he say about becoming disaster or Planet X or this inland sea?
Well,
what did he have to say about that?
Well, in his readings, these ideas would come, and I know they're from a supernatural power. We all know they're supernatural. These messages from God. What they said was some of the things that slipped out in some of his medical readings were that, quote, the greater portion of Japan must go into the sea. He also said that California, San Francisco, Los Angeles, both of these must be destroyed before New York. So he's saying all three of those cities will be destroyed by cataclysms. He said what is now the coastland of many a nation will become the bed of the ocean. What else did he say? He said that when you see, and this is a very important thing for people to remember, because if you live on the West Coast, you need to remember this and look into it and keep your eyes open. Edgar Casey said, when you see the eruption of either Mount Vesuvius in Italy, or Mount Pelée in the Lesser Antilles, either Mount Vesuvius or Mount Pelée, then about 3 months thereafter, you'll see the major earthquakes on the West Coast, all the way from the West Coast up to Nevada. Huge megaquakes. So watch for those eruptions of either Mount Vesuvius or Mount Pelée, P-E-L-E-E.
Where's that located? Where's Pelée located?
Well, Pelée is I believe, on one of the islands in the Lesser Antilles, which is like north of the eastern shoulder of South America. There's a chain of islands that runs north and south called the Lesser Antilles. And I think it might be a St. Lucia, or one of those islands. But you can look up P-E-L-E-E, now Pelée. And I'm watching myself. I got to remember to keep watching for those eruptions. Oh, and I'm going to tell you something else. It's amazing. When you're a scientist, and I always had this belief in science and never strayed from the real physical world to the supernatural, because I never believed that there could be anything supernatural when I was, younger. Well, I've seen so much evidence now to prove that supernatural prophecies indeed exist, and they are accurate. Not only in the Bible, where they prophesy things that are happening today, but also by men like the Hopi Indians and psychics throughout the world. Nostradamus predicted that there would be a pole shift, that the earth would actually rotate vertically. And God predicted this in the book of Isaiah around 550 BC, in Isaiah chapter 24. And if you look at, I'm going to give you the exact Hebrew to English definition, which was butchered by the King James translators. And I'm just going to give you verse 20 of Isaiah chapter 24, verse 20. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall nod like a hammock, and it shall fall and not rise again. Well, you put a globe, take a model globe of the earth and put it into the bed of your backyard hammock, and then pull the hammock back and get it ready to swing. You can visualize what would happen to the globe when the hammock is in a state of equilibrium in the center. The North Pole is pointing upward. But when you pull the hammock back to allow it to swing, then the North Pole rotates vertically downward, so that the North Pole goes where the equator is, and the equator goes where the South Pole and North Pole are. And that's what the Bible is saying, that the earth will nod. A nod is always a vertical rotation, like you nod your head to indicate yes, not a horizontal rotation. So that's very clear what the Bible says. There'll be a vertical pole shift. Now, this is also stated by Nostradamus, who didn't even know about the Bible. He predicted this in his quatrains, and then you have Edgar Casey, of course. Oh, it's one of his major quotes. Edgar Casey said that the Earth, the poles of the Earth will shift such that what was once the tropical zone will become the more frigid zone. So what does that mean? Well, you have to, the only way to make a tropical zone become frigid is to rotate the Earth vertically so that, let's say, Ecuador goes to the North Pole. And the North Pole goes down to the tropical zone.
John, isn't haven't the poles already shifted? Haven't they found a little bit of a movement from the poles, that the North Pole has actually shifted a few miles?
Well, you have to distinguish between the two kinds of poles. There's the geographic pole, and then there's the magnetic pole. The magnetic pole of the Earth, first of all, has indeed shifted tremendously, 50 miles, as you say, in just a few years. And the scientists tell us that this is a very dramatic and abnormal shift of the Earth's magnetic poles. In fact, the shift has caused problems with aviation. And if you look it up, you'll find out. You should be finding even more and more news articles on the internet about aviation problems, navigation problems, due to the shifting of the poles. And I spoke with a guy who worked at, I'll get back to the geographical shift in a minute, but I spoke to a guy and he was in this kind of field, and I still have his number, but he told me that indeed in Alaska they're having trouble with aircraft flight, aircraft navigation, because of this magnetic anomalies that are occurring with the Earth's magnetic field. And you're right, the magnetic field of the Earth is getting screwed up. Also, if you look at the jet stream, go to the Weather Channel or go on the internet and look for the jet stream that is depicted wrapping around the Earth and going over the United States on the weather map. That's a very important type of display to watch on a daily basis. I've been watching it videotaping it now ever since 2004. And I've seen jet stream go from what used to be, now we're going back several decades, what used to be a very smooth horizontal line, which is called the jet stream, and that's where the fronts come down from Canada. Above this line, which is basically it's a wind kind of a stream high up in the atmosphere. And above that line of wind, normally the cold air stays there up in Canada. And south of that line, that jet stream line, the warm air remains. So everything is fine. You have moderate days without a lot of moderate temperatures, without any kind of extreme abnormality or turmoil, turbulence in the atmosphere. But when a jet stream goes from what used to be a horizontal line, and you can visualize it as sort of like a line that would demarcate the U.S.-Canadian border, so to speak. Okay, that's what the jet stream used to look like about 30 years ago. Today, it looks like a capital W. Now, from 2004 to 2009, the jet stream looked like a capital W on the Weather Channel. The peak of the W was up a little bit above the U.S.-Canadian border, and the trough of the W was somewhere down in Arizona, at that latitude, Texas, Louisiana, that latitude. And the jet stream would roll from west to east, from they call it
discover what's really going on in the world.
Okay, hold on a second here.
Mainstream media won't tell you.
All right.
Okay. Well, now that W has gotten more accentuated, huge, and it's becoming very worrisome. But getting back to the geographic pole shift, that's a different kind of pole shift, where the crust of the Earth actually rotates. The Earth itself rotates, and that causes global destruction. That has not happened yet. Now, the wobbling seems to have increased some more. I'm not sure. I have to do more research. I believe the wobbling of the Earth, and they call it the Chandler wobble, Chandler wobble. We have to go to the internet and check the latest undulations of the change.